What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Motor City Metrics. And as you can see, I am all by myself tonight. The gang is out. Raj is out with softball. Uper was unfortunately not feeling well. But the show must go on. So I'm stepping up tonight to host the Motor City Metrics podcast. We're going to have a fun show for you tonight. We're going to talk some Tigers, and then I have some fun Detroit Tigers quizzes that we're going to do to end the show. But yes, thank you everyone for joining me for the Motor City Metrics podcast. We're going to get into the Detroit Tigers and Cincinnati Reds series. We're going to talk about Detroit Tigers with the future of the Minnesota Twins. And like I said, we're going to talk some free agency as well. And then we're going to end the show with a fun little quiz. Won't be a long show at all tonight. Probably will be around 25 to 30 minutes. This is the first show I've ever done by myself. It's very hard to do a show by yourself, but I'm going to give it a go tonight. And yes, any contribute, what's the word I'm looking for? Anybody in the chat that wants to ask some questions, it would be very much appreciated, especially when you're trying to do a show by yourself. But thank you, everyone, for joining me for the Motor City Metrics podcast. If you really, really appreciate it, if you would subscribe to Motor City Metrics on YouTube, check out the Motor City Metrics podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and also make sure to follow us on X, which was formerly known as Twitter. But let's get into it. We're going to talk about the Detroit Tigers and the Cincinnati Reds series. So the Detroit Tigers dropped 2 out of 3. Richard is in the house. Thank you, Richard. So again, anybody in the chat who's joining along, you have any questions, comments, concerns, make sure to drop them. It makes this go by a lot better, and it makes me feel like I'm not just sitting here talking to myself. But yeah, the Detroit Tigers dropped 2 out of 3 to the Cincinnati Reds, and the Tigers, they fall to 67 and 79 on the season. I will answer you guys' questions as the show goes along. Reese Olsen is definitely a player we're going to talk about and highlight on this podcast. But yeah, the Detroit Tigers dropped 2 out of 3 to the Reds. They are 67 and 79. And I posed this question on Twitter, and it's the first topic we're going to get into on the show is the Detroit Tigers' quest for 75 wins. Now, it's not a crazy quest. You know, it's not I don't think it's the quest everyone wants the Detroit Tigers to be going for, but I do think in a year where we all expected progress, we all expected the Detroit Tigers to see what they have. That was like the prove it year for the Detroit Tigers. Like I said, 67 wins. The goal is 75 wins. And if you remember, when we did our preseason predictions, a lot of people didn't have the Detroit Tigers even winning 70 games. So the fact that we can sit here today on September 14th and talk about the Detroit Tigers potentially winning 75 games, I think goes to show that the season has been a lot better than fans have hoped. Obviously, there's been a lot of injuries that the Detroit Tigers have had to deal with. Riley Green's another guy we're going to talk about in his future with the Detroit Tigers. But 75 wins is the baseline. It's the goal. Like I said, 8-8. The Detroit Tigers have to go 8-8 to win at least 75 games. I want to know in the chat and in the comments, 75 wins. Do you consider it a successful season for the Detroit Tigers? For me, it's a 9-game improvement from last year. They won 66 games last year. And if you're just looking at the general improvement, if they can make a 9-game improvement this year, could they potentially make a 9-game improvement next year? Now, we obviously want that to be the goal. We've talked about it a bunch on this podcast, me and Uper, about the Detroit Tigers having playoff expectations next year, having hopes to win the AL Central. And by the looks of it, I mean, 84 wins next year. Again, we're going to talk about the Twins and what they could potentially look like. But, I mean, the Twins, realistically, the Minnesota Twins can forfeit the rest of their games this year, and they could still probably win the AL Central, which is crazy to think about. So who knows? Maybe 84 wins is enough for the Detroit Tigers to win the Central next year. But I do talk about that 9-game improvement, 75 wins. As Richard says in the chat, 75 is great. I think you just look at the circumstances with the Detroit Tigers, with all the injuries they've had to deal with, not having Casey Mize for the full year, Matt Manning dealing with a couple of very unfortunate, unlucky injuries, getting hit with the ball off his foot. Tarek Skubal missed the beginning half of the season. Eduardo Rodriguez was out for an extended period of time. Riley Green has not been able to stay healthy. You have Kerry Carpenter, who missed an extended period of time as well. Like Spencer Torkelson has really been the one constant for the Detroit Tigers. A lot of the other guys that they were really going to rely on have either not performed, like Javier Baez, or have been injured. So I do think 75 wins, taking that into context, I think it's been a very successful season for the Detroit Tigers. Now, I'm the optimist on this podcast. I'm always the guy trying to look on the bright side. And I do think it has been a season, and not even in the major leagues too. You look down in the minor leagues with these offensive hitters like Jace Jung, Colt Keith, Justin Henry Malloy, Winsell Perez, Justice Bigbie. A lot of these hitters are having really good seasons for the Detroit Tigers down in the minor leagues. Even Parker Meadows before he got called up, and even down with Jackson Jobe, who's looked really good in West Michigan. You've got Ty Madden, who had a good start tonight. Sawyer Gibson Long, another guy called up. So as Ray says, the season was all about developing. Torkelson's development alone makes it a successful season. I'm right there with you. I mean, Spencer Torkelson, 28 home runs. Looking at some numbers, 81 RBI. So Spencer Torkelson has the ability or the opportunity to maybe inch closer to 90 RBIs. There's no way he's going to get to 100 RBIs this year. But yeah, he's been a run producer for the Detroit Tigers. You also look at a guy like Matt Vierling, who had a grand slam today, has been hitting pretty well for the Tigers as of late, has kind of found his power stroke a little bit. And even Akil Baddoo went deep today. He's a guy that I think there's going to be a lot of talks with him this offseason and his long-term future with the Detroit Tigers. But yeah, that's my vote. I think this has been a successful season. Surprise, I am the optimist. But yeah, I want to know your guys' thoughts on the Detroit Tigers 2023 season as it comes to a close, which is very crazy to talk about. I feel like this season has absolutely flown by. But yeah, Reese Olsen. I've seen a couple comments in the chat already about Reese Olsen. Yeah, as Tyler Matson said, Reese Olsen is looking like quite the find. Reese Olsen has pitched 92 innings for the Detroit Tigers this year. That is the third most out of any Detroit Tigers pitchers who have. Eduardo Rodriguez, who's been around 130. Joey Wentz has pitched 93 innings. And Reese Olsen sits there at number 3, which is crazy to think about because I feel like he hasn't really been up for that long. But yeah, he has been very, very good. He had a no-hitter into the 5th inning against the Reds. And Reese Olsen, 7 strikeouts, 4 walks tonight. ERA is sitting at 4.30. In the month of September, his ERA is sitting under 2. As Ray said, the seasons go by faster every year. Yeah, I feel that, especially with I can't agree with that more. But Reese Olsen, here's the question I want to pose to everybody is, I asked Raj this on the last podcast about Jackson Jobe. Does he have the highest ceiling of any pitcher in the Detroit Tigers organization? I think Tarek Skubal should be in that conversation as well, looking at his baseball savant percentile rankings. Tarek Skubal has been really, really good for the Detroit Tigers. I think he's been really unlucky this year. And his expected ERA is in the 99th percentile. His barrel percentage, 92nd percentile. Walk percentage, 91st percentile. K percentage, 90th percentile. Tarek Skubal has gotten pretty unlucky this year, and his ERA is still sitting there at under 3.5. I think there's a conversation to be had for him if he has the brightest future of any pitcher in the Detroit Tigers organization. But then I'm looking at Reese Olsen. Is he sitting there at number 3? Can you realistically say Reese Olsen could have a brighter future than a Matt Manning or a Casey Mize or Ty Madden or Wilmer Flores? I think there's a real debate to be had, especially how he's been able to hold his own in the majors. And this is a guy who was never a highly touted prospect. He was never a top 100 prospect in baseball. And it just goes to show you, if the Detroit Tigers could develop Reese Olsen in this way, like I heard Scott Harris say, development doesn't stop at the minor league level. And I think we've seen that this year with development at the major league level. We've seen Reese Olsen develop at the major league level. I mean, he wasn't great in Toledo. I believe his ERA was around 5 when he got called up, and a lot of fans questioned that. But just to see him, could you imagine what they can do with a guy like Jackson Jobe when he gets called up and continue to develop him? What they can do with a guy like Ty Madden, a guy like Wilmer Flores. It's been really, really great to see. And that's the question I want to ask everybody who's listening and or watching is what is his ceiling? Could he be the Detroit Tigers' second or third best starter in a couple years from now? He's 24 years old. Now, there's also been the debate about, is Reese Olsen a starter? Is he a reliever? He's had some trouble getting through the order 3 times. We saw that in his last start. Did give up a home run against Spencer Steer against the Reds. But all in all, I think you cannot ask for anything more for Reese Olsen. And I think he's just another young pitcher to add to this incredible young core of Detroit Tigers pitchers that I've just mentioned. I mean, I didn't even mention Joey Wentz, who, yes, he's had a very rough year, but I still think it would be a mistake to give up on Joey Wentz this early. And then you also have Alex Fadeo, who's 27 years old and looks like he has really found his role in the bullpen. And he's definitely not a guy I want to give up on. Has dealt with some injuries, but I think he could be a factor for the Detroit Tigers moving forward as well. Thank you to Blood Right. As I read through some of these comments, Matt Manning has given up his feet for this game. Respect. I hope not. I really hope Matt Manning has a bright future with the Detroit Tigers. He's 25 years old. Strikeout rate was not as high as a lot of people wanted it to be this year. But yes, Matt Manning, unfortunately, I guess he did give up his feet. So thank you, Blood Right, for the $5 donation in the YouTube chat. We've got a comment from Tyler Matson who said, if Olsen keeps up how he has, I think he's really showed a lot of potential with this young staff. Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. And I think there's a debate to be had about just how high his ceiling is. And I know I don't want to overreact because we've seen, I mean, we saw this with Joey Wentz last year. I mean, that's another question that you could pose is Joey Wentz had a really good ending to last season, has not been able to follow it up this year. Hopefully that's not the case with Reese Olsen, but he is still very young, not a lot of experience. So it'll be really interesting to see what kind of opportunity he gets in 2024, whether it's in the rotation or if it'll be in the bullpen. Tyler Parker with a comment in the YouTube chat. Lakeland playoff update. They're up 10-2 in the 9th. Clark is having a good night with 2 singles, 2 walks, and 2 runs. That's great to see. I know Max Clark was not hitting great in Lakeland. Again, very early with him. There's no reason to overreact with Max Clark. And the other thing I saw is Ryan Kreidler had a 3 home run night tonight. Take that for what it's worth, I guess, Ryan. Kreidler is a guy I think a lot of people expected to make an impact with the Detroit Tigers in some way this year. Is killing it down in Toledo. At least tonight he is. And we can look around the minor leagues before we end this podcast, just kind of looking at some performances, seeing who's standing out. I do like to check and see what's going on down there because I think there's a lot of good stuff that's been going on down in the Detroit Tigers minor league system. But yeah, we went over Reese Olsen. We went over the Detroit Tigers potentially getting the 75 wins. If you guys wouldn't mind, if you drop a like on this live stream, I'd be really, really appreciated. As Richard with some, I wouldn't say unfortunate news, Wyatt Langford with a 340 is hitting 349 with 9 bombs. I don't know if that's a conversation I want to really talk about right now. And yes, Samuel, I will be flying solo this whole episode, but we will do a fun Detroit Tigers quiz at the end of it. So I hope you guys stick around and you guys can help me do this quiz because I'm definitely going to need help doing it. But yeah, let's move on to the Detroit Tigers versus the Minnesota Twins because I think this is a fun conversation to be had. I was talking with my friend about this. The AL Central, I'm not going to say the future's not bright in the AL Central, but I mean, that remains to be seen. The Kansas City Royals, other than Bobby Witt Jr., there's not really much to get excited for with the Kansas City Royals. The Chicago White Sox, again, they don't really have an identity. Their farm system has gotten a little bit better with some of the trades that they've made. But yeah, I don't really have a lot of faith. I don't think a lot of people have faith in the Chicago White Sox future. And then you got the Cleveland Guardians, who we know they can develop pitching. Gavin Williams, Tristan McKenzie. They still have Shane Bieber. I think you would be crazy to count them out just because of their track record. They've always seemed to bounce back. They've always seemed to find players and put a winning product on the field. But you just have to question their offense. I mean, they don't have a lot of offensive talent at the major league level right now. So that leaves me to talk about the Detroit Tigers versus the Minnesota Twins. So the Minnesota Twins are 70-76 this year. They are up on the Chicago White Sox right now, so it looks like they're going to be 77 and 70. And like I said, the Minnesota Twins could probably forfeit the rest of their games. I wouldn't say probably, but it would be rolling the dice if the Minnesota Twins forfeited the rest of their games, and they could potentially still win the AL Central. But yeah, for Minnesota, I think it's really interesting that they're likely going to win the Central. Now, you can put an asterisk next to it if you want. I completely understand that. But Carlos Correa has not had a great year for the Minnesota Twins. I mean, let's just call it how it is. Carlos Correa has been really disappointing for the Minnesota Twins. And yes, absolutely, Javi Baez in the chat. White Sox are Luis Robert, and that's it. I mean, I would mention like Eloy Jimenez and Andrew Vaughn. They still have Dylan Cease as well. But other than that, I mean, Tim Anderson, he's not going to be there long term. I mean, they've got Elvis Andrus playing every day, that just blows my mind that a team trying to compete. I mean, the White Sox were a team that was trying to compete for a playoff spot, even a World Series over these last couple of years, and having Elvis Andrus playing every day was always a little bit wild to me, if I'm being honest. But for the Minnesota Twins, like I said, Carlos Correa hasn't been the player we've all expected him to be. He still has 5 years left on his contract, so I would expect him to bounce back in some way. I mean, you might have a little concern with his injury history, obviously, him signing with the Giants, then backing out of that because of the injury, then signing with the Mets, and then there was more questions about his medical records. So we'll see there. But in terms of the Twins, you've got this second baseman who I cannot pronounce his first name for the life of me, Eduarda. I cannot pronounce it. Isn't it Julian? We'll call him Julian, the Minnesota Twins 24-year-old second base prospect who's been very, very good for them this year, hitting at the top of their lineup. You have him. You have Jorge Polanco. Max Kepler was a guy who was in a lot of trade rumors this offseason. He's been a very productive hitter for them. You have Royce Lewis, who's been a bit of a sensation for the Minnesota Twins. Alex Kirilloff, Willie Castro. Willie Castro has been a two-WAR player for the Minnesota Twins this year, if anyone was wondering. I was looking into that a couple of days ago and made me a little bit angry. I don't know. But Willie Castro has definitely been a productive player for the Twins this year. And then they have some really, really strong pitching with Pablo Lopez, Sonny Gray, and Joe Ryan. So, yeah, Minnesota, I don't know if they're going anywhere next year. I think they have some young pieces. Sonny Gray is a free agent at the end of this year, so it'll be interesting to see if Minnesota can bring him back because I think he's a big piece to that rotation. But, yeah, it'll be really interesting just viewing the future of the AL Central with Minnesota sitting there at the top of the division. And I don't think you can count out Cleveland just because they still have that young pitching. They can still make some trades this offseason. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see Cleveland fighting for the division next year as well. But let me know what you guys think in terms of the AL Central next year. Who is the biggest threat to the Detroit Tigers winning the division next year? Do you still think it'll be the Twins, or do you think they'll collapse? Because I feel like with the Minnesota Twins, they always seem to find some success, but it never seems sustainable for the Minnesota Twins. And then the Guardians as well, who I think you have to put some trust into them just because of how successful they've been over these last couple decades. But Tyler Parker in the chat, Lakeland with the victory. So they have game 3 tomorrow night. That's great for Lakeland. We'll see if they can pull it out. And then Samuel in the chat has a question, I believe. As bad as Javi has been, can we all collectively agree we're so glad that Correa didn't take that? So basically he's glad that we picked Javi over Carlos Correa. I don't know, Samuel, about that. I mean, Carlos Correa has not been good this year, but he's not been Javi Baez bad. Like, I can pull up Carlos Correa's numbers. I believe his OPS is around 700. Listen, he'd still be a top 4, top 5 hitter on the Detroit Tigers team if we had Carlos Correa. But that's a conversation for a different day. I feel like the Javi Baez conversation and his struggles and his future with the Tigers, that's like I said, it's a dead horse that's been beaten. And then Samuel had another question about if we add an impact bat and arm, can we contend for the Central next year? So, Samuel, we actually are having a segment that's going to come up right now. Actually, we're going to get into that. It's a perfect segue. We're going to do a free agent segment. So I didn't know what to name this segment. So last offseason, Raj came up with, I think it was Slam It or Jam It was his name. And basically we just took some free agents. We said slam it or jam it, which it was very confusing because I didn't know like which one was good because slamming it and jamming it are kind of the same thing. So I came up. This was very on the spot. About 5 minutes before the show, I came up with free agent smash or pass. Again, if you guys have a better name for it in the chats or in the comment, please let me know. But that was the best I could come up with, and it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm gonna give you guys a free agent. Let me know in the comments if you're for that free agent coming to the Detroit Tigers this offseason or you're against it. So we're not going to get into all the free agents, just a handful of guys that I've been looking at and I wanted to talk about, and I'll give my thoughts on these players as well. So we'll say we'll do 5 players. We'll keep it relatively short for the free agent smash or pass. Maybe it could be a new segment for the show, but I'll have to run that by Raj to make that an every show thing. But yeah, first player I want to mention to you guys is Mitch Garver, who is playing with the Texas Rangers this year and has had a very successful year. And Mitch Garver's always been a guy who is able to lift the ball, is a guy who's always been able to hit home runs. Now, he is up there in age. If I can pull up his numbers in just 1 second. But my question to you is, do you think the Detroit Tigers need to add a veteran catcher like a Mitch Garver? Because I'm looking at these free agent catchers right now. I'm looking at guys like Travis d'Arnaud, who has a club option, Yasmani Grandal. I don't really know if I believe in him just because of his age and his ups and downs. I look at a guy like Mitch Garver. I know he's going to bring power to this lineup, and we definitely need more power in the Detroit Tigers lineup. So, yeah, smash or pass, Mitch Garver. Again, we probably need a better name for that. But Mitch Garver this year, so far, 17 home runs. Garver is 32 years old. 916 OPS, is hitting 280 as a catcher, though. That's very, very intriguing. He will probably want a multi-year deal. But, yeah, what do you think about Mitch Garver and Jake Rogers kind of sharing duties next year behind the plate for the Detroit Tigers? That's my first free agent I've been looking at, and I do think the Tigers should look to add a catcher because no offense to Carson Kelly, I know he's done the little things right. I think he's handled his pitching staff very well, but offensively, I'm not sure. I think Mitch Garver is just a very big upgrade for the Detroit, and especially Jake Rogers. Jake Rogers has had a very good season for the Detroit Tigers, but I still think he's a bit of an unproven commodity. He doesn't really have the track record. So if Jake Rogers really struggles offensively next year, I think the Tigers aren't going to have a lot of options. I mean, you're going to call up a Dylan Dingler who struggled in Toledo. So I think adding a free agent catcher would be really, really interesting and a really good addition to this Detroit Tigers offense. And I think a guy like Mitch Garver is a player we should all look out for. Tyler Parker in the chat talks about Mitch Garver or Victor Caratini. Tyler, who does Victor Caratini play for? I know he was with the Brewers. I know he originally was with the Cubs. Not too familiar with what he's done this year. But I mean, I know he's definitely younger than Mitch Garver. But yeah, I think adding a veteran catcher. Oh, so he's back with the Brewers. I can check his numbers real quick. But in terms of adding a veteran catcher, I mean, I think it's something the Tigers should really look into this offseason. So that's my first player. Are you yay or nay if we want to change up the wording a little bit? Mitch Garver. If we go around the infield, another guy I've talked about on the podcast before is Whit Merrifield. Now, he does have a mutual option. So I don't know if he will be with the Blue Jays next year. If I am the Blue Jays, he's a guy I probably want to keep around. The Blue Jays are making a playoff push. He's a good veteran in that lineup. But Whit Merrifield, to me, is a home run free agent pickup for the Detroit Tigers if it happens this offseason. Second base, we've had that debate there about Zach McKinstry, Andy Ibanez. You're not really in love with that as your everyday second base, options next year. So if you can add a guy like Whit Merrifield, who we know can be your everyday second baseman, you can put him at the top of the lineup. You can do that lefty-righty combo of Riley Green, Whit Merrifield, Kerry Carpenter, Spencer Torkelson, a combination of those guys at the top of the lineup. And I think Whit Merrifield could also play some outfield as well. I think he's had some run in center field this year. He's a guy, again, a veteran that you really would like to add. Is not going to add a lot of power, but is sound defensively. He has some speed still at his age. I think Whit Merrifield would be a great pickup for the Detroit Tigers as well. As like Samuel said, when was the last time we had a steady, everyday second baseman? Ian Kinsler. I mean, if you want to throw Scope into that, I know Scope kind of played some first base as well. But yeah, I mean, Whit Merrifield, I think, again, just having that veteran presence, especially with Miguel Cabrera not being on this team next year, you want to have that veteran leader. And for Whit Merrifield, he's been around the block. And yeah, I think he would be a fantastic addition as well. So I want to know your guys' thoughts on Whit Merrifield as a potential pickup for the Detroit Tigers. And like the contract, what would you give him? I believe he's 34 or 35 years old. I can double check that. But Whit Merrifield, in terms of a 2 or 3 year deal, the Tigers would probably have to pay up to get him because he has had a very good year. He was an all-star. But at 34 years old, yeah, I think he would be a great addition to this team as well. As Tyler Parker in the YouTube chat, Jonathan India, he adds, I think Jonathan India will be expendable with how many infielders since he has. And also, this is a great, because we've been thinking about looking around the league, and definitely there's going to be an episode this offseason where we look around the league and look at some trade candidates for the Detroit Tigers. Tyler Parker talks about Tommy Edman with the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals, that's a whole nother topic. That's a topic for another show, the Cardinals and what they're going to do. I still think they probably want to compete next year. They still are a very talented team. They have a lot of big names. But Tommy Edman, he's a guy, 28 years old, can steal some bases, has 12 home runs this year and about 400 at-bats. He's a guy you can put at the top of the lineup, and I think he can make a positive impact. Tommy Edman can also play shortstop, which I'm not saying Javi Baez is going to be off this team. I'm not saying Javi Baez can't bounce back, but having that backup option in Tommy Edman would be a great option as well. So that's a great comment from Tyler Parker there. And Jonathan, yeah, we've talked about Jonathan India. He's a guy I would really love to see in a Detroit Tigers uniform. And I think he's still young. I believe he's 26 years old, where he can grow with this young core. He's only a couple of years older than Spencer Torkelson. And I believe he's the same age as Kerry Carpenter. So he's a guy you could really trade for and add to that young core for 2024. So Jonathan India, another guy, I believe we talked about him last offseason as well. He could be a very interesting addition to the Detroit Tigers lineup in 2024. And as Javi says, the Reds would probably be looking for pitching. Absolutely, the Reds need pitching. And the Detroit Tigers do have some young pitching. Now it'll be interesting to see if the Cincinnati Reds want major league ready proven pitchers, like some veteran pitchers, or would they be willing to trade Jonathan India for Wilmer Flores or a young pitcher like that who really doesn't have any major league experience. But that'll be a fun topic to debate at this offseason. And then another free agent we can look at if we're going to stick to offensively. If we go to the outfield, another guy we talked about is Teoscar Hernandez. We had a comment on the last podcast about Teoscar Hernandez. He's a guy that hits home runs. Simple as that. He's very, very hot and cold. At least this year, he was very, very hot and cold. Had a very, very rough start to the year for the Blue Jays, but has come on really, really strong for Toronto. And not for Toronto, for Seattle. I apologize. He's been with Toronto most of his career. He's with Seattle this year. He's been a big part of Seattle's renaissance and getting them back at the top of the AL West. Here's my problem, and let me know. Technically, we're still doing smash or pass. So we had Mitch Garver, we had Whit Merrifield, and now smash or pass Teoscar Hernandez. Sam says he would love to sign Teoscar. Here's my thing with Teoscar Hernandez. I think he's a good hitter. I think the Tigers need power. They need a right-handed bat. I just think he's going to ask for too much money, and he's going to ask for too many years. He's a guy at 30 years old. If he ends this season really strong, you're going to look at his season in totality and say Teoscar Hernandez has had a pretty good season in 2023, and he's had a very good track record with the Blue Jays before he was moved to the Mariners. So I think he's going to be a guy that's going to ask for a 4 or 5 year contract. And I don't know if Scott Harris is going to want to sign a free agent to that long of a contract. I think he's going to want to lean towards these 1 or 2 year free agent deals. And I think Teoscar Hernandez is a guy who's going to want to get paid and is going to want to get paid for the long term. So I'm out on Teoscar Hernandez. Honestly, I think he's going to be a little too pricey for the Detroit Tigers, and I don't think they should be committing 4 or 5 years to this guy. And now if it's a 1 or 2 year deal, then I'm all for it, but I just don't see that happening. I think he's a guy that's going to have a lot of suitors. He's a middle of the order impact bat. Again, a little too inconsistent for me, but I think he's going to fall out of the Detroit Tigers price range, in my opinion. But Tyler in the chat, he adds, I don't think Teoscar will be worth what. Yeah, exactly. Teoscar won't be worth what he'll be asking. Yeah, again, I just don't know if I want to commit all those years to Teoscar Hernandez. But our next free agent, we can move to the starting pitchers because I know that's definitely a topic and a debate that needs to be had. I think the Detroit Tigers, with the situation of Eduardo Rodriguez, we don't know if he's going to be here now. I really am hoping Eduardo Rodriguez will be a Detroit Tiger next year. I think he's a great veteran to have around. I think we don't know if he wants to be here, but we can hope he wants to be here. Obviously, with him waiving his no trade clause, he picked here over LA for what that's worth. So really hoping Eduardo Rodriguez is a Detroit Tiger next year and he opts into that contract. But I do think the Tigers could still look at some free agent starting pitchers. I think they were pretty successful last offseason, grabbing a guy like Michael Lorenzen, being able to flip him for a top 10 prospect in their organization. Now, Matt Boyd, unfortunately, didn't work out the way we wanted it to. But I do think it was a good effort by Scott Harris, and I do think he's going to look to do something similar this offseason. So let me throw a starting pitcher out there for you guys for the Detroit Tigers. Smash or pass, Jordan Montgomery, who was with the Cardinals this year, was originally with the Yankees, was traded for Harrison Bader, started this year with the Cardinals, and then was traded to the Rangers. I think he's a guy. He doesn't have the greatest track record. I mean, he's had a couple of good years in Major League Baseball. Also had a couple of years where he hasn't been that great. But I do think he's a great veteran to add to this rotation. He's 30 years old, has been pretty reliable this year. I'm all for Jordan Montgomery as long as it is a 2 or 3 year deal. I think anything longer than that, I think the Detroit Tigers should not be giving out long-term contracts right now. I don't think that's the way to go. I think especially with the Giants, we saw with Scott Harris, he didn't give out long-term contracts. So if Jordan Montgomery is willing to take a 2 or 3 year deal and the Detroit Tigers are willing to overpay for him, I think he would be a great addition to this rotation. But as for me, I think I'm going to be out on Jordan Montgomery just because I think he's going to want a 4 or 5 year deal. He's going to want to get paid, and he's going to want that long-term security. And I don't think the Detroit Tigers should be the team to give it to him. And as Sam says, I appreciate you, Sam, for playing along with the game. Sam says, smash for the rotation depth. Our pitchers cannot stay healthy. Absolutely. I think the Tigers need to build on that depth. We've talked about the Detroit Tigers trading some of their young hitters for pitching depth. I do think that's a really realistic possibility. The Detroit Tigers trying to trade for a young starting pitcher. Not even necessarily a young pitcher, just a pitcher that has multiple years of control for them, that can help them win in 2024. And yes, Tyler Parker says either re-sign Erod or sign Montgomery. If it's 5 years, then it needs to be front-loaded. I mean, if I'm being honest, I'm a much bigger fan than Eduardo Rodriguez than I am Jordan Montgomery. I would much rather have him and commit to him, Eduardo Rodriguez, long-term than Jordan Montgomery. So I hope we don't get to that point where we have to pick and choose between them. But we'll obviously have to wait and see. And then Tyler with another comment, and this is going to be a good one. Tyler Madsen says, how about Ohtani? I'm being serious. With Cabrera coming off the books, that's $32 million coming off the books. So spending $20 million on Ohtani. So he's talking about giving Shohei Ohtani $50 million. Again, we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast with Shohei Ohtani. I don't know. Don't get your hopes up. That's all I'm going to say is don't get your hopes up. Shohei Ohtani is likely going to be on the West Coast. I think the Dodgers are a really interesting destination for him. The Padres, the Detroit Tigers are not a big market team. They're not acting like a big market team. They're not spending like a big market team. And I think we're going to have to accept that as fans. We may not like it, but I think that's just the reality of the situation. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think we've seen with teams like the Tampa Bay Rays and the Cleveland Guardians, you can be a successful Major League Baseball team and not have to give out a bunch of money and commit to these free agents long term. So it's a conversation that we could have potentially on a future podcast, but share time to the Detroit Tigers is not something that I'm really going to be entertaining in. I don't think we should really. That's not something that should be in the minds of Detroit Tigers fans, if I'm being honest. And our last free agent we can look at is a guy, Michael Lorenzen, who, to be honest, hasn't been great for the Phillies. Has gotten hit around a little bit after throwing that no-hitter. But Michael Lorenzen, I think he was a great clubhouse guy for the Detroit Tigers. I think he really fit here. I think a lot of people really liked Michael Lorenzen with the Detroit Tigers. And if he wants to take a one-year deal again, I mean, we could give him 1 year, $10 million deal again. I think a lot of Tigers fans would be very, very happy with that. Again, not a big strikeout pitcher. Doesn't miss as many bats as you'd probably want him to, but he's a guy who can get outs. And if Michael Lorenzen, if the Tigers bring him back this offseason and he can replicate what he did this year in 2024, I think he can be a good piece to the rotation and helping the Detroit Tigers try to make the playoffs in 2024. So smash or pass, Michael Lorenzen is my final free agent. So just to go over the 5 free agents I posed to you guys for the Detroit Tigers this offseason, we have the catcher Mitch Garver. We have infielder Whit Merrifield. We have outfielder Teoscar Hernandez. We have pitchers Jordan Montgomery and Michael Lorenzen. So definitely as the offseason comes closer and, we get into the dog days of winter where there's no Tigers baseball, we'll definitely get more into free agents. But I think it's definitely exciting. I think a lot of people are getting pretty excited for free agency. It's what a lot of people want to talk about, and it'll be very, very interesting. So, again, I just want to thank everybody who's tuned into the show tonight. Again, unfortunate circumstances where Uper wasn't feeling well. Raj wasn't able to make the show, but we're holding it down. I think this has been a pretty fun show. And to close it out, I wanted to do something pretty fun. So, me being the baseball Tigers nerd that I am, I really like to do quizzes. And I think doing a Detroit Tigers quiz live on air would be really, really fun. And I think you guys in the chat are going to help me, especially with spelling, because I cannot spell at all. So I'm really going to need help with you guys spelling for me. But let me pull up this Detroit Tigers quiz. So this quiz that I have pulled up is the Detroit Tigers opening day lineups from 1999 until present day 2023. So again, if you guys are listening, you can help play along. I'll kind of commentate it as I go. But yeah, this quiz is going to be tough. We have 20 minutes. I probably won't make it the full 20 minutes. We're not going to get all 299 if we're being honest. I mean, we might. We'll see what happens. But we're going to do our best. We'll give it like 10, 15 minutes and see how we do with this Detroit Tigers quiz. But I thought this was a fun little way to end the show. And so let's do it. I think we should start with 2023. So again, I'll try to commentate this as best as I can for the audio listeners. So yeah, let's do this with the Detroit Tigers 2023 opening day lineup. So let me know what you guys got. You can play along in the chat or if you're listening. So shortstop, we've got Javier Baez. Oh, I think we just do last name. Baez, and I'm terrible at typing, so you guys are going to see that. Center field, the Detroit Tigers opening day center fielder, was that Riley Green? Yeah, so Riley Green, the Detroit Tigers 2023 starting catcher. I think that was Eric Haas. First base in 2023, that was Spencer Torkelson. Oh, Tyler in the chat, thank you. So we got Badu. Badu didn't show up for 2023. Badu showed up for 2022. I think Austin Meadows probably is going to show up. So in 2023 and 2022. Your DH, Cabrera, is definitely going to show up. So, yeah, Miguel Cabrera shows up for all of these. I don't think we're going to go all the way back to 1999. We'll probably cut it off at like 2010, maybe 2015. We'll just do the recent Tigers because I don't want this to go too long. But yeah, Miguel Cabrera definitely got us a lot. Samuel in the chat says Jonathan Scope for the Detroit Tigers starting second baseman for a couple years. If we look at the starting third baseman for the 2023 Detroit Tigers, I think that was Nick Maton. Let's see how we're doing at 2010. Okay, we'll see. We'll see how far we can get. The Detroit Tigers starting third baseman, opening day third baseman for 2023. It's not Mate. Is it Vierling? It wasn't Matt Vierling. Matt Vierling was the right fielder for the Detroit Tigers. I mean, their opening day starting pitcher was Eduardo Rodriguez. Let me know if you guys. Peralta. Kreidler. Was Kreidler the opening day? I hope that spelling is right. Yeah, so Ryan Kreidler was the Detroit Tigers opening day third baseman in 2023. So we're now on to 2022. We've got Austin Meadows, Javier Baez, Miguel Cabrera, Jonathan Scope, Akil Baddoo, Spencer Torkelson, and Eduardo Rodriguez. For 2022, we need a right fielder, a third baseman, and a catcher. Again, I'm trying to commentate this the best I can for the audio listeners. Jake Rogers. I did get Rogers, but I think that showed up. Detroit Tigers starting catcher in 2022. Oof. And they're starting third baseman as well. I mean, I think Robbie Grossman was their right fielder. You guys are going to have to help me. Let's go ahead and skip the 20 team. Okay. Yeah, if you guys want to let me know in the comments, the Detroit Tigers third baseman, opening day third baseman, and their opening day catcher for 2022. Because Candy, there we go. And I might need help with that spelling if I'm being honest. I'm gonna have to pull up Jamer Candelario's name really quick, because I do not know how to spell that. Jamer Candelario. Oh, Tucker Barnhart in 2022. So yes, Barnhart was his Tigers tenured. I don't think went the way a lot of people expected it to. Jamer Candy. There we go. So Jamer Candelario. So we've got all of 22 now. So now we're on to 2021. The Detroit Tigers starting shortstop in 2021. I'm going to go Willie Castro. They're starting right fielder in 2021. Is Victor Reyes, Yuke's guy. Victor Reyes was their starting center fielder in 2021. Catcher, I know Wilson Ramos makes an appearance in 2021. Pitching wise, I believe that was Matt Boyd, and so he's their opening day starting pitcher for 2020 and 2021. They're starting outfield for 2021. Goodrum, that's a Nickel Goodrum. So he was their shortstop in 2020 and their DH in 2019. So for 2021, their outfield, you have Victor Reyes. Oof. There's two left fielders on here. There's some, I don't know if you guys see that, but Robbie Grossman's on left and they have right. And then they have, so I think they just forgot DH. Yeah, I'm going to go back to 2021 because I'm drawing a blank on there. Robbie Grossman, we already got him. 2020, they're starting first baseman. Was that the CJ Crone year? That was the CJ Crone year. 2020, this is a blur, honestly. Gordon Beckham. Oh, if Gordon Beckham shows up, that was an intro. Gordon Beckham is your opening day second baseman. Grayson Griner, that's another good one right there. Grayson Griner, the 2019 starting catcher. Oh man, these years are just tough. I know Nick Castellanos. was their starting right fielder in 2019. The starting shortstop in 2019. Oof, Jordy Mercer. Yep, I know Josh Harrison was Josh Harrison. Josh Harrison was their starting second baseman. Brandon Dixon. I think he came on strong at the end of the year. Oof. All right. I think we're gonna move on to 2018 now. The 2018 starting center fielder, that was Leonis Martin. I know they had Victor Martinez in 2018. Who else was on the opening day roster? 2018. Oh, this is gonna be a throwback. Not really, but Christian Stewart in 2019 and 2020. He's an easy guy to forget about, if I'm being honest. Christian Stewart was a pretty highly touted prospect. Yeah, I know. This is bringing up some PTSD for Tigers fans doing this quiz. 2019 starting. Oh, that was Jordan Zimmerman in 2018 and 2019. I think we're doing pretty well, for being honest. These are the dog days of Tigers baseball. We're still missing a couple outfielders. I know we're missing a center fielder. Is Mikey Matuk on here? Mikey Matuk. That is a name right there. No, I don't think Garneau was the catcher. I'm sorry. I didn't know people would be upset with this quiz. I thought it was something fun we could do. But yeah, let's go to 2018. Their starting catcher, I think that was James McCann in 2018, 2017, and 2016. Cameron Maben. Oh, that's a good one. Cameron Maben in 2020. So we're filling out the 2020 and 2021 roster. So we have all of 2019, all of 2022, all of 2023. We just need the Detroit Tigers starting catcher for 2020. They're starting center fielder for 2020, and then a right fielder and a left fielder for 2021. Jacoby Jones, that is a great one right there. Another guy that's kind of easy to forget about. So that fills in that pretty nicely. Let's go back to 2018. I'm going to cut it off at 2015. I don't want this to go too long, and I know for the audio listeners, this is probably pretty hard to follow. So we could definitely do this for another podcast or another video, but we're going to cut it off at 2015. So let's see how much we can get for that. 2018 shortstop and second baseman. Kinsler was 2017 was Kinsler's last year. Left field, and that was Upton in 2017. You've got Verlander, who's going to fill in a bunch for the pitchers. The chat wants to keep going. I know it's tough. All right, we'll go to 2010. All right, because I feel like we can fill in those pretty easily. Prince Fielder, yeah, we'll get the fielder once we get to 2013 and 2012. But for 2017 shortstop, Iglesias, I did spell it right. So Jose Iglesias was the Tigers shortstop for a while. So now we're just missing the 2018 second baseman. Is that Dixon Machado? It is Dixon Machado. Wow. All right. So we're just missing a catcher in 2020 and a right fielder in 21. And we're on to 2016. And 2016, I believe, was Anthony Gose. So we are doing well, guys. Center fielder, I believe that was Rajay Davis. Yes, it was. In 2015. 2015 left fielder, that was Yoenis. Oh, I'm going to struggle with this name. There we go. 2015 catcher. I don't think Avila was on the Tigers that year. Oh, he was. David Price was their opening day starter in 2015. There we go. We're doing good, man. The chat is definitely helping out. Thank you to Tyler, Samuel, Javi Baez. You guys have been killing it. 2014 right fielder, that was definitely Torrey Hunter. Center fielder, that was Austin Jackson. And then the Detroit Tigers starting shortstop in 2014 So Jose Iglesias was injured to start the year. So I think in 2014 it wasn't Eric Ibar. Listeners and everyone in the chat is going to have to help me out with the 2014 shortstop, because that's going to be a tough one. And yeah, where is JD Martinez? Why isn't JD Martinez on here? So I think JD Martinez was injured. He was injured to start a couple of these seasons. But yeah, for some reason they don't have a DH for some of these years. Yeah, JD Martinez is. Oh, here he is. JD Martinez for 2016 is on here. Let's go to 2013 now. We got a couple more years left. Johnny Peralta. Yep, he definitely will make an appearance on this list. 2013 first baseman. That's Prince Fielder. Fills in for 2012 as well. 2013 left fielder. 2013 second baseman. I wonder if Ramon Santiago was a 2012 second baseman. I know Delman Young is on here for the 2012 left field. Brennan Bosch. I think Brennan Bosch is the right fielder for 2012. Infante, there we go. I don't know how I forgot Infante. And then the 2013 left fielder, is it Avicio Garcia? Nope. There's Quentin Berry on here. Not Quentin Berry. 2013 left fielder. That's the question. I feel like we should get all of 2013 through like 2010. Brandon Inge, he's going to be on here for obviously the older teams. But yeah, Brandon Inge comes up for 2010. Brandon Inge retired in 2011, so that was his last year. I don't think Maglio shows up for 2011 for the right fielder. I know Will Rhymes for the 2011 second baseman. Inge was done in April of 2012. All right, so we're looking at a left fielder for 2011 and a DH for 2012. Ryan Rayburn, that's a good one. It's Ryan. I'm definitely there. We go. Ryan Rayburn fills in for 2011 and 2012. So just to try to update, I know this might be pretty hard for the audio listeners to follow. I'm trying to do my best to commentate. Andy Dirks for 2013. There we go. So we have gotten all of 20. We've gotten 2011 through 2013. Basically, all we're missing is the Detroit Tigers starting shortstop in 2014. They're starting catcher in 2020, and they're starting right fielder in 2021. And then 2010, Andrew Romine. Yep, I think that's it. There we go. Andrew Romine, the starting catcher for 2020. Still, the starting shortstop for 2014, I know, was like a veteran that they brought in until Iglesias got healthy. I can't remember his name. Yep, the legendary Ryan Rayburn, who he was with the Tigers for a while, if we're being honest. But let's just try to knock out 2010. We agreed to stop at 2010. So we got Austin Jackson as the center fielder. We've got Maglio as the right fielder. We have Miguel Cabrera as the first baseman. We have Brandon Inge as the third baseman. And we have Verlander as the starting pitcher. So for 2010, was Adam Everett still around? He was. So Adam Everett was the shortstop. Detroit Tigers second baseman, was that Polanco? If I can spell that. Carlos Guillen. There we go. Raj will be mad for forgetting that one. So Guillen fills in as the DH for 2010. Catcher for 2010. If it's not Avila, I have no idea. It'd have to be Gerald Laird. Scott Sizemore. I think it is Scott Sizemore. There we go. And then just the left fielder for 2010. It wasn't Brennan Bosch. Oh, Johnny Damon. So there we go. Miggy was moved to third in 2012 and 2013, and then was moved back to first in 2014. Question from Hobby Bias. But that's all we got. I'm going to stop at 2010. Yeah, if you guys want to leave a comment after the show, if you find out who the 2021 right fielder was and the 2014 shortstop, but we absolutely killed it. And yeah, thank you guys for everyone who was listening. This website is called Sportical. Very, very fun website. It's got a bunch of quizzes, Tigers, Pistons, baseball, any kind of quiz you want. Definitely if you're bored at work or you need something to do, go check out some Sportical quizzes. And if Sportical wants to sponsor the podcast, that would be awesome. No More Mazzara. There we go. It definitely is No More Mazzara for 2021. But thank you guys for listening and contributing to the quiz. I hope it was fun. We went almost an hour, which is crazy. I was expecting to go about 25 to 30 minutes. But thank you, everyone, for watching and or listening. We will be back probably on Monday. Also, stay tuned for the channel. On Sunday, the Bleachers to Speakers podcast will have a live reaction to the Detroit Lions and Seattle Seahawks game. That's going to be a big game at Ford Field. Lions looking to go 2-0. So we'll see if they can make that happen this Sunday against the Seahawks. But I'm John from Motor City Metrics. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I will see you guys in the next one.